Welcome, welcome, and welcome to Vet Talks, the Adapt, Improvise, and Overcome Oddcast, also known as a podcast, although I'm stealing from a friend of mine, Christopher Lockhead, who does Oddcast, because like him, we are different. Because here we focus on essentially that mindset, adapt, improvise, overcome. And that helps our military members and others, of course, overcome virtually any obstacle, physical, mental, even spiritual, and how this mindset can be the force behind creative destruction, or more generally speaking, how it has lent itself to our military members' best innovations. And this is relevant, folks. This is relevant to almost everyone, because for corporations, innovation and invention is necessary for survival. And of course, in the military, well, survival there, it could be a matter of life and death. This brings us to the reason behind Vet Talks, and of course the parent organization of Vet Talks, Project Reload. That's an organization, and this is a oddcast or podcast dedicated to helping us understand that the more you know about our military members, what they do, how they do it, the more you appreciate them, and the more you understand how their service is so incredibly relevant to the businesses that we run today. That is how their military service, their skills, those soft skills, are so critical to what our companies need to do every single day, and now more than ever. I am Christian Anschutz. I am very lucky and fortunate to be here with you, and I'm your host. I'm a proud Marine Corps veteran myself. I have a broad and diverse background above and beyond my military service. I was an entrepreneur, a corporate executive for a couple large and leading firms, both in engineering, safety sciences, and advertising. And then about 5 years ago, I became the founder, or at least co-founder, of Project Reload. Look it up, projectreload.org, O-R-G. Our guest today is a gentleman and friend by the name of Eric Ward. I got a bio here. Let me read a bio. This doesn't do him service, and yet we'll get more out of him. So just stand by, and you'll understand the real Eric Ward as we get into this. Eric Ward is a former Green Beret who served with the 1st Battalion, 10th Group in Germany. Prior to making the move to Special Forces, which is what Green Berets are, he was a member of the 1st Armored Division as a combat engineer and deployed to Iraq for the first time in 2003. He is airborne, ranger, mountaineer, and sniper qualified. Eric left the military in 2010 after 2 deployments with his team. He began working in product development and innovation, where he's remained for the last nearly 10 years. He currently has 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 patents to his name, and has created several products which are used around the world today. He currently lives outside of Chicago, actually not too far from where I used to live, in the northern suburbs, with his wonderful wife and 4 lovely children. Eric, welcome to the show, and it's good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
So how are things in Chicagoland? All quiet, I assume. I hope the weather is at least as good there as it is in northern Michigan.
Yeah, it's quiet and it's cold. Every time the kids ask to get outside, we look out the window and just and wish they thought like adults and realized it was time to stay inside. But it's good.
The wonderful thing about kids and your background and living in Chicago is it's a great time. It's a great place to help them understand cold weather training and survival. So, throw a little bit of water on them and just T-shirts, push them out the door, let them run around for an hour or so and see how they do. A few iterations like that. And, they'll learn all sorts about what it takes to stay warm in adverse conditions.
Yeah, see how long they actually want to play. My wife, Julie, she gives me a hard time about not wanting to be outside now and jokes that I was on a cold weather team. And I tell her it's all about preparation. You can be warm anywhere. I just, that preparation takes a lot. And, the kids want to go now. Now doesn't prepare you for the cold.
Before we get into the topic of the show, which is innovation and transition, that is the topic that Eric and I will be exploring. I will throw out something, and I'll just get Eric's thought on this right out of the gate as it's related to the small talk that we're opening up with here. Doing Project Reload, of course, my military service, cold weather training, all that stuff, but Project Reload, where we take high-level corporate executives out. We run field exercises with them, with the United States military and these executives, and we teach them leadership. and we do this using transitioning military members on military bases, etc. I have noticed that this saying is so fundamentally true. These great women and men leaders from corporate America, nothing breaks them faster than the cold. And I think I saw that when I was in the military. What are your thoughts on that? Is dealing with the cold one of the more like oppressive forces out there that really cause a person to second guess, like, what can I do to change my environment?
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think it's probably always been that way. I mean, you hear stories as far back as the military and warfare goes that the schedule, everyone's schedule, even if you're trying to surprise each other, the poor weather, especially cold weather, can kind of give you a way to predict what the enemy might do. So yeah, it's absolutely, it's certainly tough to deal with. Like I said, you can prepare for it, have the right equipment, but at the end of the day, it's as miserable for both sides of of the opposition. So yeah, it's definitely one of the worst things.
And a fun fact for you military historians out there, I mean, the cold has changed the fate of nations and probably, in fact, the world in terms of conflict. Most notably, you had Napoleon, first foray out of two that I'll cover into Mother Russia, and then, of course, Nazi Germany in World War II, both of which the cold were accredited and attributed for being the key force that led to the demise of both those forces. And yet, to Eric's point, actually the cold actually affected both sides equally. And I think historians would argue that the cold was used as a bit of a scapegoat, where there were so many different things that actually caused those forces to flounder in those conflict that was way bigger, actually way more systemic than actually the cold itself. But that's just for you historians, military historians, and of course anybody that wants to gets themselves in a situation. And this is actually what Improvise, Adapt, and Overcome is all about. When you're in a situation and you're like, oh my God, the world's coming down on me. It's so hard. It's so miserable. It's gonna break me. When you pause and you go, look, everybody else is dealing with this too, and they're surviving, then you too can survive. So with that, let's move on to this innovation and transition. Eric, I read the bio, Special Forces, Green Beret, all impressive, all that great stuff. Why don't you spend a minute or two? Tell us a little bit about ourselves. I mean, where did you serve? What did you do? What was your rank? Just tell us a little bit about Eric Ward.
Yeah, definitely. I guess, in short, the way I kind of got there and did what I did and have done what I've done is a pretty fun and loose childhood of getting to do things and innovate and play in the woods and explore and build and create. And I think that really lent itself to, entering into the military. I like every other person remembers 9/11, where I was at, and when the military, started to heavily recruit and was building up. I joined in 2003. I was getting through basic training in AIT, and then I was at my unit only 2 weeks before deploying to Iraq. And I was there for about 15 months and just saw that, the job that I had, I didn't enjoy it that much. I didn't think that we were, necessarily doing everything in the best way and had the best equipment and the best leadership. In the last few months, I got to see a couple teams of Green Berets, just kind of floating around and doing their job. And, they looked happy. And I remember thinking, man, like, I didn't get issued a smile. Like, where the hell is my smile at? Why don't I look happy to be here and to be doing my job? And, it was interesting to me. So when that deployment ended and we got back, I turned in my paperwork and got to go to selection. And I was surprised when I got there. First, I was, I think, 165 pounds, soaking wet, as they say. And there are all these huge guys there, like Thor-looking dudes. And I just thought, I showed up to the wrong class, and there's not a chance. And what I've been, permanently surprised by is the people who tapped out and who didn't make it. I could never picture myself making it, but I also couldn't imagine myself quitting not making it. So it was always kind of a weird space to exist in, of not knowing, not being able to see the future and where I'll be, and not thinking that I could get there, whatever it looked like. But made it through selection, 2 years of school.
Eric, you just went on mute.
Oh,
right.
Oh,
you
yeah.
made it through selection, and then you went on mute.
Yeah, selection for 2 years, a lot of great training. Really enjoyed it, and then got to my team, and had more good experiences than we could talk about if we did 10 shows. Just met some of the best people I've ever known. Had some incredible experiences. Even 10 years removed, these are people who are still family to me and that I'm close with. Getting out of the military, there are two reasons I got out. One, I felt like I was running out of luck. And then two, I started creating equipment, and some of that equipment, had a little bit of success. So it was doing good things in the world. I could see that, and wanted to continue, seeing if I could do more of that and kind of impact, more people and see my creations in more places.
That's interesting. I want to hear more about that in a second. And that, just for the military members, please excuse a little inner rivalry fun. And then for the civilian folks, this is all happy banter because, at least in my family, my brother was in the Army, my dad was in the Navy. All the military services and branches are fantastic, with fantastic groups of women and men, the most diverse workforce in the United States, at least. That is something I've heard quoted numerous times. And yet we like to have a little bit of fun. So as you're describing, happy, hardworking, a bunch of Adonises and whatnot. Well, you just described in the Green Berets, the entire Marine Corps. So, and it's all right that, you had to join the one small part of the Army that would be kind of like the whole of the Marine Corps, but that's all right. Hey, the fun aside, you were talking about you got out because you were having some successes, and I think I heard you say you had some products, right? There's some products that were actually doing something in the world you're still in, and now you're like, I want to get more into products. Like, what are you talking? What did you innovate? Tell us more. This sounds interesting.
Yeah, so my team went on a daytime mission, which wasn't the best case scenario in the world, and not too far out from the target, we got into a pretty good gunfight that lasted a few hours, and a couple of my teammates were significantly and permanently injured, as well as some of the other folks that were with us from other countries. At the time, there was certain equipment that we had access to, but things, when you're wanting to move quickly, some stuff was too big or too heavy, and we didn't bring with us. So I have one teammate in particular who couldn't walk out on his own and needed to be carried, and we didn't bring anything with us to carry him on. All said, I think it took us 3 hours to move a kilometer to get to a place where a helicopter could land and take him out. And after just a little bit of reflection, I thought there could be something we could have done, differently or better. And I certainly didn't want someone else to have to do that same, 3 hour, 1 kilometer walk, that we did. So a couple of days later, I had a couple sewing machines with me in Afghanistan, and I created the first, what's now known as the Phantom Litter, which is just a piece of parachute material with 8 handles on it. Folds up really small, goes inside of the back of a vest, and you can carry someone on. It's something I made the first prototype of. Unfortunately or fortunately, we got to try it out a couple times during that deployment. And once the deployment ended, I was fortunate to find a company to manufacture it for me. And those are now used around the world.
Wow. So let me make sure I understand this. So you go into a combat operation, you're going into combat. There are going to be some shots fired. You're in a prolonged gunfight, and casualties happen. And sadly, that's what our military men and women sign up for. And it's still tragic when it happens. but you went in there and it doesn't sound like you were wholly prepared to deal with evacuating somebody. I mean, what were you doing? If you didn't have a litter, how were you getting these two wounded teammates out? What were you doing? Like,
I mean,
carrying them, between, 2 or 3 soldiers, or what?
yeah, unfortunately, we did a lot of fireman carrying, which is a great physical training event, but it's not practical. Anyone who's tried it for real, we try and put all of our weight there. Yeah, when you're being carried and pretend to be a motionless body, but once you really have one, I mean that's tough. And when you're carrying someone, you're out of that fight, and you certainly prefer to be in the fight than just being a moving target. So you have about 10, 15 yards of energy in you, and then you kind of pass that person off to someone else. So unfortunately, we were carrying people, and it wasn't the best case scenario. But like I said, I mean the other option was to bring the right equipment with us, but it wouldn't have been right for us prior to that incident. It would have slowed us down, would have been heavy to carry, and right just wasn't right in that case.
Well, you bring up some interesting points. I mean, especially in military operations, especially military combat operations, what is you have to think about right across the continuum. And if you were carrying extra gear, you might have ended up with, especially if it was loud, especially if it was cumbersome, you might have ended up with 4 casualties instead of 2. And so what was right actually sounds like something that you created, which was this litter. Did you actually build this thing and design it with like surplus parachute material with, I think you said sewing machines? I mean, you prototyped it right there in the field? Is that did I?
Yeah, definitely made the first couple right in the field. Our supply people were gracious and provided us with some equipment and some materials. So we made the first couple, and I can tell you they certainly weren't pretty, but they did the job. And it was a proof of concept. We got to see really quickly that it actually worked. It actually made sense, and it was something that was worth moving on to kind of the next phase.
That's very interesting, and I think I know something about this. Actually, I know something about this litter, and if I get time, I'll bring it up. It's one of those things that kind of sends chills up and down my spine, just because it hits really close to home personally for me. But I think you also said you had not you said, I said, it was in the bio. You have a number of patents. What was that patented, by the way?
Yeah, so there's a patent on the Phantom litter. There are a couple other people on it. Once I went out and tried to find a company to actually turn this into a product. There were other people who contributed to it, and kind of definitely made it better. I thought naively early on that my initial solution was the best it could be, and it was the best case scenario. But the reality is it had to be manufactured. It had to be easily usable. A lot of different things that I couldn't see on my own. So it wasn't a useful piece of equipment until some other people really had a chance to kind of take it through the paces.
Well, unless your job was going to go from being a team member to basically pestering supply and stealing all the sewing machines, then yeah, you needed some manufacturing help. Yeah. What are these other patents? You have a history of creating things. Can you it doesn't have to even be the patents. Maybe you have some things that are patented, some things that aren't. Can you explain some other things that you've come up with that you think are novel, or more importantly, that other people think are novel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the coolest and most novel thing I ever created in my life was I was probably 10 years old, and a friend and I wired my house up to a Battleship game. So we had the Battleship screens, and we had a floor plan of our house. Our house is fairly small. It definitely fit on there. And we had these little switches hooked up to all the doors, so we could see when people were opening and closing doors. So, at the time, I certainly felt like that was the most useful thing in the world for kind of sneaking around the house. Beyond that, to things that were actually, useful. I've a couple patents for a smart medical kit, which is like basically like an AED for trauma. So something that helps walk you through how to treat someone if you have medical supplies. and is somewhat aware of what you're doing and what you're using. I think a lot of the innovation is really, it rarely a spark, like a glorious spark and something new and exemplary. It's a lot of continuous improvement, more looking at problems and making small fixes. So innovation sounds perfectly glamorous, but a lot of times it's really small improvements. The Elon Musks and Steve Jobs of the world are pretty rare and unique.
Yeah, but like if we go back to your first example, the phantom litter, still that actually helped save lives, and that's fairly profound. So an innovation which maybe not is SpaceX grand, still hugely important to a number of different people. And again, that's the story that I know, which is somebody that was in one of those litters that helped save her life. So that's fascinating. So you have this from the time you were 10 years old, which now I understand why you wanted to go in the Green Berets. It was all about autonomy and sneaking around and just kind of having, ruling the roost. These things are related, folks. So just in case you haven't picked up that pattern, I'm seeing it clear as day. But this background, and then of course, innovating these things and working with supply groups and testing these things out, getting them in the hands of other service members. You had to have been a general, a colonel, at the very least, a major in the Green Berets, right?
No. So I left the military, on paper as an E6. I received promotion orders to E7. And like I shared, I kind of felt like I was out of luck. I would have had to tack on 2 more years to actually pen E7, and I didn't feel like my time clock could support that. So so not an officer. Worked with some wonderful officers, but a lowly enlisted guy.
But so I was making a joke by asking the question. Of course, I knew the answer to that. So many people think that you got to have had the college education and then been an officer to come up with this stuff. And the vast majority of our military is enlisted, and these men and women are the ones that get the job done. You're an example of somebody who's getting the job done. You knew that you needed the right equipment for the right mission, having gone through the right missions, or the wrong ones, but knowing how to get out of it alive and your team members out alive with the greatest efficiency and efficacy. A enlisted man, in this case, you came up with something. You don't have to be an officer, folks. Trust me, I was a captain. The best out there, and my best influencers on me personally was my staff sergeants, were my gunnies. These are the people that actually taught me how to function, how to lead, because they were the wellspring of knowledge and experience. So going back to innovation, so you were doing this in the military, and then you've done some on the outside, which is like that everyday medical thing, I forget the medical device again, clear, the ED. Thank you. I just remembered it. Is the innovation process, what's the environment like? Is it the same in the military as it is in your experiences in the various roles in the private sector? Is it different? How's it compare? Maybe they're exactly.
I would say, they ultimately end up being, being the same, or the end product might be the same. I think they maybe are approached initially differently. Ultimately the innovation comes down to needs, and it's need of the customer. Sometimes you're the customer, so it's your personal needs. I think in the military we didn't necessarily dedicate ourselves or create dedicated teams to innovation. We just understood that we were going to continuously find the wrong way to do things, or encounter the wrong way to do things, or things that could have been better. And that, we didn't want to keep running into the same thing. So we were really, looking for the problems, or knowing that we were going to be finding them, and then innovating around them. Outside of the military, I think it's certainly a an active process, something that's focused on innovation. And so there are some incredible teams doing great work in innovation. But again, it's, rarely is it that spark. Those great innovation teams are understanding the customer, they're understanding a market, understanding a problem, and then they're solving the problem. They're not, the light bulb was created to get rid of the dark. It wasn't, no one said, well, the dark is wonderful, but let's figure out some way to get rid of it. It's just observing problems. So I think ultimately it's both. In both cases, it's the problem, it's the customer that actually leads to that great innovation. I think we approach them a little bit differently.
Well, now that was fascinating. I got to add some stuff in between the lines here. So first of all, when you say it's the customer, let me just be really candid. I spend a lot of time with corporations, especially as you get into the more senior ranks of people that they know the customer, except for they really know somebody who knows the customer. So there's not enough organizations with enough people that are actually really know the customer and are applying both empathy and design thinking, which is essentially creative problem solving, to solve the customer's problem, because they don't actually know the customer's problem. They just keep trying to make a better, faster, cheaper widget that they've always made. So that's kind of an important detail that a lot of people miss. The other thing that I think that what Eric's talking, I want to pull out here, you have to acknowledge that you had a problem in order to then rectify the problem. Otherwise, you have this thing called a learning disorder. And talk to me, Eric, you ever do an after action review? Yeah. So how did you identify problems so that you could improve on them? Can you explain anything about the after action review process?
Yeah, so the after action review is the first time I heard it was definitely in the military, and I hear it a lot now. And it's just reflecting deliberately on what was good, what was bad, what could we have done different. And we did that in every case in the military. And the reality is, do you stop running into problems at some point? No, you don't. You just don't keep running into the same problems. So we take that, that same idea of after action or hot wash or whatever you call it, and do and apply it now. I wouldn't say that it's done in as structured a way, outside of the military, where it's essentially a requirement. Like the mission isn't done, or the project isn't done, or whatever isn't done until you've reflected on, what was good, what was bad, what can we do different next time. And it's certainly easy to skip that part when in reality it's probably one of the more important things you do. Not what you did, but what you learned from what you did.
You never stop running out of problems, I think, is a really profound point. And for all you organizations out there that think you are an organization of continuous improvement, I'd ask you to check yourself before you wreck yourself on your next project. Because if you're not doing after action reviews on a regular basis, again, the activity or that cycle isn't done until you do a review on how it went, what went well, what went poorly, and what can be improved upon, then you're not really that dedicated to continuous improvement. Rather, that's two words that you like to put together to, fluff up either your executive ego or your resume. I actually see too few firms have that mindset that you just described. Again, the cycle isn't done until an after action review is. Real good stuff, Eric. Hey, we're a little bit low on time. I want to ask you, so you got this background, you're an innovator from the age 10, you end up joining the Army, deciding to go into the teams and making it through the trial by fire, so to speak, invent a few things. You go on to the corporate world. How was that transition? I mean, being part of the Green Berets, and all joking aside, when you leave the Marine Corps and you're in this tight brother and sisterhood, getting out is tough, and the Green Berets is tight. I mean, they call it teams for a reason. And what was your transition like?
I think, I feel pretty fortunate. Mine was just in terms of going from one job to the next was easier because, I came up with a piece of equipment and a company was buying the rights, to that intellectual property from me. And I was fortunate to go on to work for that company, with people who had a similar background to me. So, it really felt like, and to an extent it was just going from one mission to the next. And, had it been something I didn't care about or I didn't think was worthwhile, it probably would have been a different experience. To go from, being on a team of people that I, worked with and lived with every day and cared about and believed in what we were collectively doing to, I don't know, selling X widget to shine floors better. I might have felt different. But, I felt good about what I was doing. And that certainly kind of helped, smooth it out. I didn't necessarily feel like there was a transition because I was continuing to do what I cared about and what I wanted to do. The actual work, didn't, it didn't matter as much as feeling good about what I was doing.
Well, that's good to hear. I think you have a different story than many. Can you, in like just 1 or 2 minutes, maybe talk about what Project Reload did in terms of kind of continuing to add to, maybe not transition, but helping you to build a network that would lead to more opportunities. You got anything you could say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really fortunate to go on a Project Reload trip. And, it's not a, for you or for me, it's not a shameless plug. It's a reality, like you said, kind of do an after action report and look back on, what was good, what was bad, what could have done, what could have you done differently? Could you have done differently? I think with the transition we were talking about, people in the military, unfortunately, too much time passes where the only network you have, to reach into is the military network you left. And a lot of those people are still doing the same thing. So, if I completely change jobs, I'm in a new location, it's hard to ask those same contacts for help and for direction. I certainly had a feel for it, but what Project Reload, broadcast across the sky was for me was, your network is going to permanently affect, the opportunities you have. You're, unlikely to find all of the things you need on your own. And, how long has it been since I went on a trip? I think it's been at least 3 years. It might be 4 years. And I can.
We call them missions, by the way, not trips, but we call them missions.
Yeah. Sorry, mission. I can trace, 4 solid opportunities, that are continuing to contribute to my life positively directly out of that. People I met, conversations that have been had, people who pick up the phone and respond to emails and text messages because I met them there and they get an idea about what you can contribute. When people can see and they feel that you can make a contribution to what they're doing, then they're going to seek you out. I think that's part of the network. It's not just about having people you can call on when you need something. It's knowing the people you can reach out to, when you have an opportunity. And I mean, Project Reload, like I said, gave me that a few times over now.
Well, and the Project Reload's benefited, of course. These things are reciprocal, and of course, your participation and continued participation in Project Reload has, benefited the organization and, of course, the overall mission of the organization. And if I could, just for the group here listening now, Project Reload, if you want to learn a little bit more about it, go to projectrelo.org. Here's the summary of the keystone, sort of the cornerstone aspect of what Project Reload was founded on, although it is branching into some new and fascinating areas, which more to follow on that in the future here sometime soon. Essentially, what Project Reload does is it takes high-level corporate executives, runs a multi-day military field exercise, or military operation. That's why we call them missions. We do this in partnership with the United States Army. So we do this on military bases using military facilities and use instructors that are either veterans or transitioning military members. And the whole point of it is we teach leadership, and these corporate executives are learning leadership military style in the most immersive way possible. And they're learning it from the same men and women that want to transition out of the military into organizations. And so the symbiotic relationship is built. And it's really, folks, candidly, it's built on this simple, intuitive, I would even call it, concept that the more you understand a group of people, any group of people, the more you know them, the more you appreciate them. And on that, I'll just say, folks, let's get to know and appreciate all groups of people. The world will be a better place when we do that. Hey, that story that sent the tingling up the back of my neck earlier when you were talking about the phantom litter relates to Project Reload. And this is a true story, folks, and I promise I'm not embellishing a bit. I was driving up to Camp Grayling, where we were going to host a military, one of our reload missions, one that Eric was on. And on my way up, I got a phone call from a friend of mine, this Lieutenant Colonel, who was calling me just to catch up. And now this is this great lady had some misfortune. She had been severely injured in a pretty well-known case where her helicopter was brought down by a barrage balloon. And everybody on one side of the helicopter was killed instantly, and everybody on the other side, well, was badly injured. And she was on the other side. She was evacuated and ended up surviving, and her tale continues, thankfully. I tell you this because as I'm sitting there around a Project Reload after action review in the evening, so we've been out there for a couple days already. We're talking about what went well, what didn't go well, etc. Again, no cycle is done until you do an after action review, and we're practicing what we preach. It turns out that one of the veteran instructors, an active duty Army officer, his team actually evacuated the injured off that helicopter. More interestingly, that gentleman's team was using a phantom litter that was created by Eric Ward. And when that realization of those three things came together all in one after action review in the most surreal fashion, I really did conclude that the world can be a small yet wonderful place. We want to wrap up here. I like to wrap up with kind of a fun, some maybe trivial, sometimes serious, but a kind of a fun question. Eric, I got two questions for you. I'll just give you the first one. I'm not going to ask both of them right off the bat. What is the best example of, quote, military intelligence, end quote, you've ever seen? Just the thing that you sometimes scratch your head and go, I can't believe as a military we can actually fight a war.
Let's see. So high level, I remember, as a pretty small team of 12 people, and being in special ops, we have a great budget, tons of money. And I remember, making trips from our fire base to some of the bases where more of the regular military troops were. And, one time in particular, there was a squad who didn't have tires for their Humvee. They needed new tires and they couldn't get them. So we ended up giving them some of ours. And, that night we're back at our fire base, and I'm sitting there for the umpteenth night in a row, drinking Red Bull and eating lobster and steak that I ate so much of that I was tired of it, thinking, why am I eating steak and lobster every night in the middle of Afghanistan, and these guys don't have tires for their Humvees? There has to be some mistake here, like the tire budget was accidentally, spent on the special operations team, steak and lobster budget. I just thought there's something wrong with this.
Well, now you understand why all those team members are walking around, everybody else with a big smile on their face.
It comes full circle. Yeah, they weren't tired of the steak and lobster yet, so they were still happy.
Oh, that's awesome. So just to show, that you've been on both sides of the world, the spectrum, if you will, of the military and private sector. So tell us, what is your favorite sort of Dilbertism, which is the same thing, but on the corporate side? What's your favorite sort of stupid corporate experience?
I would say I saw this from the time I got out, and certainly a couple of years.
All right, so what you're saying is a lot of it.
Yeah, I saw a great example of it, but one in particular, a couple of years ago, there was a large meeting, maybe 20 people, and we were scheduled for an hour, and to refine a solution we had come up with. And 45 minutes into the meeting, instead of kind of getting through what we were supposed to be doing and kind of tacking down what the solution was, we're still talking about, who was going to get credit when this thing was successful. I mean, talk about, putting the cart in front of the horse. I mean, we got rid of the horse, we sold it, and then we have a cart that we're confident was the best cart, and we're basically pulling it down the road on our own. I mean, unfortunately, there's a little bit of that in the military too, wondering who's going to get credit for a win. I was fortunate to be on the side I was, where we didn't typically get any credit at all, and we were fine with that. We liked it. There was almost a prestigious component to that, but yeah, we're being more worried about the credit versus just the actual success. Was something in that particular case a couple of years ago that was surprising.
So that's funny, because that what you described, I think everybody listening can probably reflect on and identify with, regardless of your background, military, non-military. But this idea of already before the project's even done or the effort's even done, trying to figure out who's going to get credit. And when you combine that in the corporate world, where you're probably not talking to the customer, especially the person getting credit, and you're not doing after action reviews, meaning you're not improving your ability to move past that one instance or that one customer or that one win. Just that's a Dilbert story that could be written on the front page of pretty much everybody's memoirs.
Yeah,
anyway,
I think
thank you for that.
I'm sure Mike Tyson borrowed it from someone who borrowed it from someone who borrowed it from someone. But what is it? Everyone has a plan until they get hit in the mouth, and you certainly can't plan the after party. You can talk about it, but let's get through the main event first and see kind of what happens and what works and what doesn't. Then move on.
Yeah, and of course, Clausewitz was credited for saying, that no plan survives the first shot, which is essentially the same thing. And I slightly butchered the quote. The words, the intent is the same. And we're going to close here. I want to thank Eric so much, and thank all of you listeners for tuning in to Vet Talks. Again, an arm, branch, the audio broadcast arm of Project Relo. I want to get to a real specific call to action. So if you or your organization of which you're a part of is interested in, and you should be, bringing in amazing and often underutilized talent, look to the veteran community, and please contact us, either Vet Talks or Project Relo. That's info@projectrelo.org. You can also call us at 877-760-7356. Now, this is typically a live broadcast. Sometimes we pre-record these. And we're kind of getting new into, posting this stuff on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and whatnot. But if you do find us there, or if you would find us there, like us, love us, otherwise embrace us. Help us bring these veteran stories like Eric's to light. Help us bring to light the fact that even under the most adverse conditions, that when you're working on something hard, but you're doing it with people you like, that you care about, you'll still bring a smile to your face, just like Eric said. I want to thank Supreme Lending and Michael Shasteen for sponsoring the show, another great American, another great veteran. And I want to thank all of you listeners, one and last time. Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. Thank you.